Kaicho Radio, the radio with a difference.
Attention diesel engine owners. Valvoline Premium Blue is tested and proven for cleaner engines, better engine protection, more miles and hours. So trust your engine to Valvoline Premium Blue, the world's oldest engine oil and the only oil endorsed and recommended by Cummins, the world's largest manufacturer of diesel engines, suitable for Cummins, Cat, DAF and other diesels. Purchase 2 5-gallon pails of premium quality oil at reduced price and get 1 gallon free while stocks last. Distributed by Swiss Machinery, Eccles Public Road, East Bank, Demerara. Telephone 233-3821 or 233-2495.
So good evening, welcome once again to the Political Show. I'm your host Leonard Gildharie, and this evening we have a very experienced lady here in our studios, and she's no other than Priya Manikchan. As you know, she was a former Minister of Education. She was also a minister under what was known then as the Ministry of Human Services. Am I correct?
Yep.
Welcome, Mrs. Manikchan, and I hope that you would have had a good year and that everything is going good with the kids. And I know that you're no longer a minister, but at the same time have responsibilities as a mom. So welcome, and I hope that this year brings you what you so desired.
Well, thank you very much, Leonard. And let me say also that I'm very pleased that this show exists, and I'm very grateful that you actually host it. Much has been exposed to the Guyanese people through your show, and for that we're deeply grateful.
Well, I do thank you for that. We're just here to just be the medium to bring the news to Guyana, but not only the news. We want the people to be able to judge for themselves, their representatives, and to know the standards that they hold themselves by, and by so doing some of the measure of man, if you want to put it that way. But as you know, the last time that you were here, we spoke on legal issues.
Yeah, I think that was the legal mind last
Right.
time. This is now the political
So
show.
there were many things. We talked about the courts, because I do remember that you, as the Ministry of Human Services, and then again at the Ministry of Education, that you would have been pushing a lot of issues when it concerned the welfare of children. But we're here in a different context now. There are elections in maybe 5 weeks. And so
30-something days, yes.
yeah, it is not a lot. If you put in it every single day, you're here, then you're across the river one time. But I want to ask you, what's the situation on the ground for the PPP? Do you it looks as if you guys are gonna bag it?
Let me say, I think it's hard to ask anybody if they'll lose when they're running for a post, but I'll say this with every sincerity. I'm seeing attendance and interest at small meetings. You know, the big rallies are one thing, you'll get a lot of people. The PPP has traditionally gotten between 49 and 50-something% of the vote. So you will get a lot of people at rallies, and for me, the indicator is really the smaller meetings, the meetings where people get to ask you questions, the meetings where people hear a discussion of the issues, and those have been extremely encouraging. They've been well attended. I'm seeing an energy from people that I didn't see in 2015, frankly, and an energy of personal responsibility. So not only do we expect the party to do X, Y for us, we are here with you doing this for ourselves and for our country, and I'm seeing that energy, and it's really very encouraging.
What are we getting? A lot of young people coming out, or is it a more?
You know,
folks?
I'm glad that you asked that. It's a strange mix. I'm seeing older people who we usually see have a deep interest in political activities and development of the country, but I'm also seeing young people, and I don't mean just 30s, I mean, people who are now going into adulthood, people in their 20s, deep interest in what is being said, deep interest in plans, deep interest in what policies will unfold if we were to be elected. And those kinds of, that kind of environment really bodes well for not only our party, the PPP, but for the whole country, because it says it's people who, for me, we have the majority of our country young people, and they're really interested in what happens in the country. And you see the complaints on social media, which has to be taken into account, which forum has to be taken into account, and the complaints have to be taken into account, where young people are saying, stop with the cussing Jack Leo and cussing Irfan. Tell us what you have to offer. Just before I came here, I was listening to the speakers at the rally that the AP and UAFC is having in Essequibo right now. I think they're at Anna Regina. And disappointingly, I reached up to Moses Nagamutu before I had to leave because I didn't want to be late. Not a single one of them has said, this is what we will do for you. It's all been, PPP is bad, Jack Leo is bad, Irfan Ali is bad, they did these bad things. Nothing about what we will do, how we will take Guyana forward, how we're going to manage in this new oil economy, how we're going to look after the traditional sectors, nothing like that. And those, I think young people are going to speak on March 2nd about how they feel about that kind of vacuous prevarication.
Well, I was looking at over the weekend I was at home and I was looking at one of those series on Netflix. And I think it was in Mexico that particular episode was based. And it was showing you how in areas you have the gangs actually going out and control the area, and they tell you where to go, they give you the money and so on. And I couldn't help but compare to what is happening here. And one of the good things that we have going for us as a developing country, you're not seeing the kind of gang-related turf kind of thing going on. However, I think we have improved somewhat, but I want to come back to what.
Well, I don't know that I'd call it gang, but I disagree with you a little bit. I wouldn't call them a gang, but the government has engaged, AP and UAFC has engaged in serious bullyism and denial of rights, so that people now feel you have a choice. You can either cower and hide and vote quietly, and many people will do that, or you can resist this. And I'm seeing that resistance too. That resistance to the bullyism, that resistance to the you can't go to these meetings, you can't do these things. I'm seeing that because young people generally
What is some of the bullyism thing that you're talking about there?
Fire people who they thought were affiliated with the PPP. Tell people they can't speak at meetings. Your time is over. I just came out to Region 9. I spent 8 days there where we were campaigning across villages. And people feel as though they don't have the same freedoms they had under us. They can't say the same things. They feel as though their communities are being punished by this government. And they will speak. They will speak on March 2nd. And at those meetings, you saw this beautiful mixture of young people who have a deep interest in what will happen to the babies they have in their slings, men and women. So it's not boys alone. Girls were out there in equal force. And older people who were willing to say, we've done this before, we crossed this road before, we're going back there. And it's very frightening to watch. That kind of, the bullyism in not following the law, the Constitution, our highest law, even though you said you would after the no confidence motion, by you I mean the President and Prime Minister and so on, but yet insisting that someone who smokes a joint must be thrown away. Someone who drives beyond the speed limit must be dealt with condignly. People feel like they're being pushed. Though you saw, you see news and state media that's controlled by the state. The people there, the professionals there, young people who may not be voting for the PPP, but who feel that it's fair to carry both sides of the story because they're of that generation that believe they can think for themselves. So let's carry both sides and people will decide for themselves. Them being bullied into carrying only one side of the story, into writing with a particular slant, into having their stories changed when they submit it. That kind of thing is going to backfire. You'll see it. I promise you'll see it. I'm feeling it.
Yeah, that's something that we have railed against several years back under your administration too, and coming forward. We talking here. I remember in the 90s when I first voted. There were a lot of young people who knew Cherry and Burnham at that point in time. Well, you have, let's say, this 20 something, 25 years later, we've seen a whole bunch. I think 65% of the vote under 35. I think those are the figures.
Well, you know, so a lot of the people who are going to vote now didn't have the experience of both parties, and I think that's probably the best thing that could have happened in 2015. Out of this horror that became our government, I think that's one of the best things that happened. We now have people in this country who are informed by facts and actions. This is what the PPP used to do. This is what they promised. This is what they delivered. This is how they managed. This is what they did with excess money. And you have this government. We see what they promised, what they delivered or didn't deliver, what they do with excess money. We see that. And so the people who will vote have gotten that chance. And a lot of us didn't have that chance. I started voting under the PPP. So all my years of voting were under the PPP was in government. And so I think I represent the majority of people in this country. And so you now see both sides, you see both parties. And you see what the small parties have to offer too. I mean, they have a lot of really idealistic things, but then they do nothing in defense of themselves or people's rights and so on. So people are going to have a much more informed population this election. It's actually exciting.
I'm glad for that, really.
It's very exciting.
What are young people asking for? What are they looking for?
Young people
now?
want stability. They want opportunities. They don't necessarily want handouts. They want opportunities to be able to craft their own way. They have dreams. People want to start up a small business. People want to start up a big business. But you can't in this environment. The taxes are heavy. The red tape is heavy. I know a couple trying to purchase a house right now. I hope they're listening. It's not our fault at the office. Trying to buy a house. It took so long for that estate to pass through the courts and then for the estate to be granted and written up that they continue to rent for the last couple of months because they couldn't purchase. So young people want stability, first of all, in the country. They want, I think, politicians and a government that they can trust. So there's a certain amount of predictability. If you get voted out in the National Assembly, you won't carry this country through a year of because what happened in this last year, as you know, you're on the ground. Nobody wanted to invest. Nobody was doing anything. We were at a standstill. We thought every 3 months there would be an election. There wasn't. So they want predictability. People who will be predictable in the way they obey laws and govern. They want people that they can trust. That's my deep impression from going around the country. So if you tell us you'll do something, you either do it or come back to us and tell us why you can't, why you didn't, why you won't, what you're replacing it with. And throughout the country, young people want opportunities, educational opportunities. It is by far the most desired thing amongst our young people. They want scholarships. They want opportunities to further their studies. They want opportunities to expand their knowledge base. They want opportunities to be able to just be better than the previous generation before them.
Yeah, we got a serious problem though with there's a shortage. I got a friend who's down in India right now. A rice miller for Barbies. I guess you could probably guess who it is. But he's there now searching for people who could work in his fields. They can't get workers. We got a problem here. We can't find graphic artists. We can't. If you ask for reporters when they come in, you got to see the crop that are there. I think most people. I have a little relative who's aeronautical engineer, and he's moving to the oil sector right now because, and that's not necessarily in the same aviation field. So we got some issues there. I guess you're former Minister of Education, but I want to ask you, what are some of the plans that you have? Because the criticisms has always been our education system is not geared for the work environment. It's just, and maybe you would say that no, they're tertiary and so on and so forth. But I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Well,
reforms.
Reforms on education.
Right.
So Well, we have to take into consideration where we were. And that's not taking us back, that is just being real. When you have a population of teachers where just about 30% of them are trained, you will see that in the output of your students. And that's what we had. That's what the PPP took office, when they took office in 1992, that was around where the population, the trained teachers were, about 30%. Now I've seen untrained teachers do fantastic work. Wilfred Success is untrained, he's not a trained teacher. And he has been successful as a teacher, as a head teacher, as his school owner, as a businessman, everything. But the likelihood of a teacher being able to teach better if she or he is trained is much, much higher. And so we moved training from 33% to 86%. That started, you started seeing immediately as those teachers began to be trained, and that doesn't happen overnight, as you know. Training takes, with the Teachers College alone, 3 to 5 years, depending on which program you're doing. You started seeing results. When we took office in 1992, 30% of our children who were writing common entrance, we call it NGSE grade 6 now, could go to a secondary school. It means 7 out of every 100 children who wrote common entrance couldn't go to a secondary school, not because they're bright, not because they don't want to, not because their parents are poor. Some of those things might have played. It was because we didn't have physical schools, we didn't have space, we didn't have furniture, we didn't have books, we didn't have teachers. Now we're at a place where we've achieved universal primary education. That means children all over this country, once you're of primary age, you can access primary education. I didn't say so, the UN said so. So we've met that Millennium Development Goal. We're very close to achieving universal nursery education, where most of our children can go to school. And we're very, very close. That was in our last plan, and the period got cut short. Very close to achieving universal secondary education, where all of our children in this country could go to secondary school. Then you begin to see results. When you have those kinds, that's just infrastructure you're putting in place to make sure people can access education. What you've seen, you saw that for about 10 years consecutively, we topped the region in CXE, and in the overall CXE subjects, and then in individual subjects. And we weren't topping the region only from QC and Bishops. A child at New Amsterdam Multi got top Tech Vox student. Twice, children from the Essequibo Coast, one time from Abramsville, one time from Anna Regina, two times from Anna Regina, topped this entire Caribbean region. And that's because we had diversified in the way we delivered education also. So to say that opportunities weren't there might not be painting the whole picture, because you have to have a development. I would say, though, that more opportunities can be given, particularly in using the new technology that we have with connectivity. You said you want graphic artists. We have a lot of people, young people, who are very talented in drawing, just doing anime and different things that you flip through their book and you're wowed. But that could be pushed to so much more if they could get some training. And training doesn't have to be anymore spending millions of dollars traveling overseas. You can do that online. So I think those kinds of, for sure we're going to be making sure the University of Ghana is fee-free. We're not going to be charging fees here. So people going to the University of Ghana will not have to pay fees. That's a commitment the PPPC is making. And we'll follow through with. There will be 20,000 online scholarships. 20,000 scholarships. That is free study for
Online.
20,000 persons online in various fields. We have shown you that we could not only work with governments, other governments, friendly governments, to arrange scholarship programs, but we have done that. We have moved this country from having a few doctors to having, in a very short time, enough doctors so that right now all the doctors at Lethem Hospital, not only a hospital built by us, but the actual hospital is staffed by persons who are Jagdeo scholars. They went away, they studied, they came back. They're now at Lethem Hospital working there, serving the people of Region 9 where they would not have gotten that service before, simply because we didn't have doctors. So we have shown repeatedly that not only do we say we will do these things, we actually give these opportunities. I saw accidentally ANOG, they have a Facebook campaign running. I don't think they're advertising anywhere else. And 2 persons in the last week, I can't remember their names, but forgive me for that, are doctors. And both of them seem to have graduated in the period from Cuba. They have to be JAGDEO scholars. So here, the PPP gave opportunities, and these young people qualified for those opportunities, and they're coming back to serve in the political field, not even in the People's Progressive Party. And so that's the kind of vision we have for education. Teachers being trained at a level of just a teacher's training certificate is old, it is outdated. We've now moved to teachers being graduate teachers by shortening the period, working with the various stakeholders, the University of Guyana, the Teachers Training College, overseas counterparts, to make sure that we could condense the period the teachers learn in so that they graduate as graduate trained teachers. I think we can leapfrog to another stage where we expose our teachers to learning and teaching in various other countries so that we could benefit from those experiences and that those countries can benefit from us too. So there are tons of things on the agenda. Of course, we have to take care of some issues that have plagued us as a country when we didn't have a lot of money. We should not be having textbook shortages now. If we were in government, we would not have had textbook shortages now. But of course, I believe it was the Kaieteur News that exposed it. Repeatedly, year after year, textbooks and exercise books, we're ordering them from Trinidad, and they haven't even arrived. They're not coming here. We're ordering them far more than we could pay for them if we got it from local people in Guyana. The minister refuses to account for that. She simply gives a very vague answer and says, she orders it from Chronicle, the publishing people at Chronicle.
That's the Guyana National Printers,
right? And that she doesn't know where they order it from. I mean, that's lame. It's really lame. It's a lame excuse. It's people's money. The books are not in children's hands. Let me put it that way. So we said, and we will give every child every textbook that they need. Exercise books. We're going to return the $10,000 cash grant, and it's going to raise to $50,000 within the first 5 years. Now, I say within. It could be before 5 years. Things like furniture, we had already moved a really far place in making sure we had no complaints about those issues. Furniture and so on, those are more management issues. It's not that we can't afford it as a country. It's more the teacher didn't tell you, or the school didn't tell you in time that you needed this furniture. So we'd inundated the coastland with all the furniture they needed. The hinterland still needs some furniture. Those are some of the things we've promised.
What are the things that has bothered me, or I mean, signal here for a break. But when we come back, I want to talk about the vulnerable people in our society, because I know you were the human services and then under the education. I've received some really heartbreaking stories. My wife come tell me every day the amount of things that was happening there, and we really want to help out. But I would love to see the state put into place measures that is really going to trap these vulnerable kids. But when we come back, we're going to have a little more on that.
Don't drive around in circles looking for vehicles. Visit BM Sot showroom today. BM Sot Auto Sales. Call them on telephone numbers at 231-8451. Visit them at Success, Kroll Street, and also Lusignan. Get affordable prices on vehicles, and the trade-in deal continues. In with the old, out with the new. The trade-in deal continues at BM Sot Auto Sales, in which you get value up to 70% back on your vehicle. That goes as a down payment. Buy cash now and receive 5% off instantly. Pay low down payments on vehicles. It's your turn to drive. From BM Sot Auto Sales.
Tropical delight, the flavor tasting right, pure taste and pure delight. Orange apple cranberry, fruit punch mango, yes sir, high in energy. Jumping up every day, and I'm jumping up every night. I think it's back and it's pure taste, pure delight. Energy to unload, behind a truck down the road, the taste going to explode. Tropical delight, pure taste. Tropical delight, pure taste and pure delight.
Kiteshare Radio, keeping you informed.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Burby's 99.5 FM. Kiteshare Radio.
So good evening, welcome back to the Political Show. I'm your host Leonard Gildharie, and this evening we have with us Priya Manikchan, former Minister of Education and former Minister of Human Services. And we were talking about the situation in our schools. I want to raise this issue with you. Many times I've received...
On the issue of schools, let's just remember that you have to have happy teachers to have productivity in the classroom. You have miserable teachers who are unhappy with their conditions of service, who are unhappy with their salary. You have to go and dance in the street and beat a pot and threaten the government to get their conditions and their salary increases and so on. Those are really unhealthy circumstances for the entire system. And that shows. It shows in results. It shows in how your children come home, how happy they are, how much they learn. That had stopped under the PPP, we had a standing arrangement that the union and the government had worked out mutually that was for the benefit of teachers. Not only salary increases, but various different, what we could call perks, duty-free, uniform allowance, a housing revolving fund, just different things that made teachers understand that while we might not ever be able to pay them what they're really worth, we recognize their value and we'll try to match that with more than just salary.
Through our street, I saw a little girl of 14 not going to school. We noticed it. Mm-hmm. And we asked her why she was not going, and she says, look, they took me out of school because I wasn't coming home at the time that I should. But what kind of system should be existing under the education ministry to trap such cases that fall through the cracks, if you want to put it that way?
Yeah. So to me, the person who first notices a child is missing is the classroom teacher. And I think we had begun to put some things in place because it sounds really attractive to say you have all these systems at home. It's hard to catch individual children. So it has to be working with individual teachers who are not distracted from teaching by running this child down. Teacher must be able to call a number and say, this child of this address has not been coming. And then we have to deal humanely with those children. But we've actually seen a reduction. If you go to the ministry's records, incidentally, the ministry has not released a digest since this government came into office.
And what's a digest?
A digest is actually, the Ministry of Education had the most robust reporting mechanism, where anybody, you, him, me, we could go online, we pull up numbers, how many children are absent, how many are late, how many in their system, who's going to nursery, how many kids are in Region 9, how many teachers are in Region 9, do we have more, do we have enough, what are the results we've been getting at NGSA, what are the results we've been getting at grade 9, just a digest of statistics that show what you use statistics for, to inform how you should act, and to show growth and decline where there is and so on. They have not published the digest, and that's because they can't. When you take away jobs from 7,000 sugar workers, from 2,000 young Amerindian people, from another 14,000 persons and 7,000 persons in the forestry industry, when you take away 30,000 jobs from people, you feel those effects. Not only the father who lost his job, his child who can't take lunch to school has to stay home. The child who has no boots to wear to school got to stay home. So you're seeing those numbers reflected in the register, and they have not been able to publish a digest for the same reason. Have not been able to publish a digest because you will see a serious decline in attendance, a serious decline in results across the country. And what you should have been seeing, because education is a progressive thing, what you should have been seeing was improvements on our numbers, because it was set to improve in that way. You will also see more children begging. You'll see more persons on the street. You'll see, and then you see when those numbers start expanding, you'll tax the child care. The Child Care and Protection Agency now becomes taxed, because we don't give them extra staff, but we're giving them more problems to deal with. So when there's a government in place that cannot manage, it has a domino effect on every sector. And of course, what happens in all countries, the poorest, the weakest are the ones who suffer the most. Single parents have been finding it extremely difficult.
Yeah, we have lots of that.
Extremely difficult. We did a whole register. You had, I think it was 29% of our families were single parent families, and that is extremely 29% of persons who are bringing children into the world in Guyana.
29% are single parents.
Yeah, but it may need to be updated. But that single parent household, you find it hard with two parents who are earning, and both of them could help putting children to bed and bathing and taking to school. Imagine one parent. And imagine when that one parent has the pressure of knowing either they've been downsized at work, or some of the perks they were getting there are taken away because the boss is getting less. Someone who used to bring in, a businessman who used to bring in 30 containers every quarter is now bringing in 7 containers a quarter. The store girl in his store, who has 2 children that she has to look after, she is feeling that, because she gets less. Might not be less salary, but it might be less overtime. It might be less in benefits. Yes, exactly. Perks. It might be less drops home that she was getting before. So it's awful when governments don't govern to make sure that the country rises, because every single sector suffers, and the people who suffer the most, as you asked me about, are the vulnerable groups. Old people, women, children.
You're asking us, Ms. Manik-Chen, to put you back into government. Let's assume that your party, the PPPC, wins. And let's assume that they put you back as the Minister of Education. I'm not sure if that's what you want. Let's give us 5 things that you would probably do at top of your head to reverse the situation or improve the situation.
Where? Education?
In the schools.
Well, first of all, the PPP has a program. It has laid it out in its manifesto. We've had an excerpt since the 29th of November, I believe, that has been distributed across this land, in villages far and wide, in Georgetown, south, east, every part of the country, about what it is we plan. And that manifestos, by their very nature, are brief documents. They don't say everything you plan. But like I said, we've told you some of the main things we plan with education. Teacher training is going to be robust. Free university education. We're going to achieve universal secondary education. That means every child who's of secondary age will have access to a secondary school. We'll provide all the textbooks. We will make sure the uniforms, vouchers and uniforms in the hinterland are restored. We're going to restore the cash grant, $10,000, and it's going to move to $50,000. We're going to make sure teachers benefit in a very predictable manner from the goods and services of this country. So those are some of the basic things we're going to do. Now, you might say giving uniforms are a small thing. Like I told you, I just came from Region 9. The uniforms have not been delivered to the people of Region 9. Many villages in Region 9 for the last 2 years. Where those the fabric was delivered, the sewing, because what we used to do is deliver the fabric and the women's group would sew it, and we would pay that women's group.
And it was supposed to be continued under this government?
Well, I would expect the government to continue a program like that. because it benefited everyone, and particularly because they didn't tell people they were going to stop it. And they claim now, so money is being allocated for this. I don't know where the money is going. Every year, the National Assembly has allocated money and appropriated money for the distribution of uniform vouchers.
And you found that it was not delivered?
Yes, and I'd be happy to refer you to those villages. Right? Not only did they not get it, they didn't get it in time where they got it, and where they got it in time, they're no longer sewing it for them. So this is a country that is now collecting $85 billion more than we did. Not $85 billion, $85 billion more than the PPP did. And you can't deliver services that the PPP delivered when it was collecting $85 billion less. We gave $10,000 per child. We made sure children got their uniforms. We made sure textbooks were in the school. We made sure teachers were paid and got their increases. They're collecting $85 billion more. Where is that money going? Where is it going? Increased salaries? Increased for the ministers, increased perks for the ministers, increased numbers of ministers, $1.2 billion in increased food for the government, $1.6 billion for travel so that our minister per plane could fly into these places. That's where the money is going. So it's really a shame that they're receiving more. They have more. They should have been offering more than we did as a government. And what you've seen is a contraction of, we didn't have $85 billion and we were still paying the sugar workers. We kept them employed. We didn't have $85 billion. We kept the 2,000 Amerindian young people employed. We didn't have the $85 billion they have. And we made sure uniforms were in all the villages, in everybody's hands. $10,000 was with every child. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? There is a difference with how they spend money and how the PPP spends money. And that's very visible to people who are feeling it. People feel that. They understand it now.
We in the oil producing era now, how would you use, or how is the PPP?
And isn't that frightening? Isn't that frightening that we're in a place where, first of all, we should never have reached a place where we were in First Oil with an unstable government. A government that has been deemed by the court caretaker. The highest court of this land has called them caretaker. We reached First Oil with a caretaker government in place simply because they resisted following the highest law of this land, the Constitution. That is, for me, that alone warrants a vote out. That alone warrants a vote out. That cannot be people who love this country, who would say that when the eyes of the world are upon us, looking at us because we have become this resource-rich place that has all these opportunities, or that will have all these opportunities, you have an unstable government in place. An illegal one that has been called a caretaker.
I want to ask you this, Ms. Manik-Chan. You're part of the opposition. You have a very powerful voice within that. And I think the people have been screaming for a kind of collaboration. We've been asking.
Collaboration between what?
We have oil, and if we have a divided country, should it not be a good thing for the world to see that we have a united Guyana?
What do you call a united Guyana, though? Because yes, I could answer you right now and say, oh, it's lovely to have a united country. But to have a united country, you have to have parties. You have to want the same thing. You have to, this government has made no effort, none at all, Leonard, to exercise any kind of inclusive behavior that would see some sort of cohesion. Not only between political parties, but from state to citizen. When you come in and knock off 1,972 Amerindian workers, when you go into villages like Parikar now and you say, here is a boat that the state is purchasing, but I'm not going to give the villagers because they're mostly supportive of the PPP. I'm giving my party group of 36 persons. Mm-hmm. That is that does not bode well. It does not encourage inclusiveness and inclusive shared governance and so on that you're talking about. You have to start all over. Look, when we were in office, every month I met with Amna Ali, who was the shadow minister of education for the PNC, and Kathy Hughes, who was the shadow for the AFC. I didn't invite them. I said to the party, send me your shadow. Let's talk, let's sit down, let's decide, because 3 heads will always be better than 1. Let me hear what they have to say. They'll hear things on the ground that we need to know. I will tell them first before
And you
I
were meeting
announce.
how regularly?
Once a month.
Once a month.
Sometimes more. If I were going to announce a policy, I'd let them know before it was announced. I mean, it has to start somewhere. Do you know how many times I have been invited to the Ministry of Education for anything, a briefing, a new policy? Well, they didn't put out any new policies, anything at all. How many times I've actually written them on issues, on going into schools to deal with the issue of interpersonal violence. I've written on issues and they've rejected any overture. So when you talk about, it sounds very sexy to say we should have shared governance. You have to have parties who have the country's interest at heart, and I don't hold the view that the APNU AFC would like to see what's good for Guyana. They want to see what's good for themselves, and for them that means power, 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 and they're very insecure. They don't understand that there's value in everyone, and that's why you see them treating people so poorly. If you look at just photographs, people are held at just now, I just downloaded one from their Essequibo rally. The Granger's bodyguards are holding people back while he walks by. They're very insecure, very unable to sit across a table and have a conversation. The Constitution prescribes that the president must name a GCOM chairman from 6 names given to him by the opposition leader. That would be a grand exercise of inclusive governance. So you have these structures already built in. Look at what he did. 6 names went in. Don't like those. Another 6, another 6. 18 names went in, and then he picked his own person unilaterally, a man who was most unfit, that the court has now said was badly picked, improperly, unlawfully picked. So when we talk about shared governance, it could sound nice, but you have to make sure the things that you have there work already. And if those don't work, leaping to shared governance or the idea of shared governance will remain with us an idea. There are countries all over this world. Most countries have adversarial politics. That's not to say people don't get along or can't work together. But they're always, I mean, unless we want a one-party state, which I think would be wholly unhealthy, I think you need competition. You need people to oppose and show where things are not going right. But I don't believe that necessarily means that we can't work together. So that's why I ask you, so what do you mean by that? I believe we can work together. The PPP has shown repeatedly, not only that we went into office and didn't run down the people who had very evidently stolen from this country. We know that. Nobody ran them down and tried to jail them and all that because we were going to build a country. But not only did we stop there, we then went on to build structures in the National Assembly, put in standing committees, put in like the Constitutional Committee is there. It's a standing committee for constitutional reform, putting committees where the opposition, whoever they may be, is the person chairing, like the PAC, the opposition chairs that committee. Rotate chairmanship or chairship of various committees. Make sure in the selection of people there's a select committee for when you're appointing places like the ERC and so on, that the parties work together to do that. So we have, I think, a very advanced structure. I don't think we spoke about it enough, so you may not know some of what worked. But throughout the years in office, we have been building on that, and it has been working. We have never appointed one of those rights commissions, the ERC or the Indigenous Peoples Commission or any of those by ourselves. The PPP never did it alone. It was always sitting in this committee with opposition members appointed by their parties and coming up, and we never voted on those issues, coming up with consensus, ways about how we're going to decide who the nominees would be and then how we're going to choose those persons and so on. So we have tons of structures like that that already work. and that we can work with, but you have to have the will. And we have seen in the last 4 years, this government went in with a majority and a lot of goodwill. They should not have been that insecure. They should have wanted to work. Some of those committees never sat for all this time.
I want to ask you, it would not have missed your attention, of course, a Rambo knife in school stuck in the back of a little girl. Teachers fighting with parents, teachers on the ground. It leaves a lot of pictures in their head. How have you formed an opinion, a conclusion? What seems to be the problem? How do we fix it?
I think the perfect education system is one that assumes that the home is failing, and that system meets those failures. So I think we should aim to get that perfect education system. In the meanwhile, I believe we have to work closely with each parent, and that sounds like a daunting task. It's not. We have 110 high schools. We can meet all the parents of 110 high schools easily across this country, once there is a will to meet. Many times people behave in a manner that they didn't think about. They didn't foresee in these circumstances, if this were to happen, what would you do? I'd like to get to the bottom of why any child is walking with a Rambo knife to school. Does she feel unsafe? Does she think she'll need to protect herself? I don't know. I'd like to find that out. I'm not speaking of this particular incident because it's under investigation, but I'm just saying I think those are things that we have to examine. And then we have to craft our system so our children are a little bit more conscious. You're out there. This was not a fight in the heat of the moment. This was more an arrangement. So I'd like to see an education system that caters to that.
I'm a little
I think it is, for me, no parent should go into a school and assault a teacher and get away with it. It's not something we can tolerate, or it's going to become a scourge that we can't deal with. So I think we're going to have to put things in place as a country. Working with our teachers and parents. Let the teachers and parents tell us how they think we can resolve this, because that's who we're serving.
As a media worker, sometimes you get a little confused with the news that keep emerging. Like, for example, you see the oil, different days, you learn different terms, low-hanging fruit. And you hear these things like lifting agreements and so on. And then you hear with GCOM, and I get even more confused. You hear about this list and that list, and by the time we catch ourselves, we head into elections. We have a list right now, I think is about to be approved.
OLE.
The OLE. And we have a population of 750,000, I think it is, and we have 661,000, they say, voters, 200,000 students. How do you deal with something like that as a political party, and how do we fix something like this going forward?
What is your concern specifically? Tell me.
How could we not have gotten it right?
But what is not right? Which part?
The list, a simple thing as the list.
I don't know that the list is not right. We have agreed to a continuous registration. By we, I mean the major political parties, through law, that they made into law. So we have continuous registration. Now, we're persons, it's not a big deal every election that every 5 years, we're racing to go get people registered and so on. It's supposed to be easier. Democracy demands that we make these things smoother, that people can exercise their rights, particularly their right to choose a government, in a manner that doesn't confuse the entire nation. It shouldn't be chaotic. I think this whole exercise was made chaotic, and I laid that at the president's door, Granger's door, at the door of his cabinet, at the door of the AFC, who defended his actions when he went ahead and, knowing fully well that the election was around the corner and wanting, in my view, to manipulate what happens at GCOM, appointed someone unilaterally outside of the law who showed us. We didn't have to guess. He showed us that he was going to do things that were totally out. Issue an order for house-to-house registration, do things that were completely out of norm, sense, you know. So we know why he wanted to do that. And so any confusion you see now springs really from that period when we had that going on. I think you shouldn't, if your concern is that we have a list, because I think I heard that in your question, that we have a list that has a large number of persons. I wouldn't be too concerned if I were you. If you look at, and I was trying to pull it up here, if you look at other countries right here around us, Caribbean countries, you'll see countries who have continuous registration, that process, have those kinds of numbers. And so that should make you a little bit more comfortable, or I hope it does. That's not to say we shouldn't be vigilant and we shouldn't be careful with what is being churned out at GCOM, because I still have, I think they haven't made me comfortable as yet that we could totally trust them. But if you look at countries around the world, around the Caribbean, a large percentage of the total population is on the list. So you have like we have right now, you said it was 600 and something in 2015. Let me see, 2015 we had 735,222 as the whole population. And then we had a registration list of 570,708, which was 77% of our population was registered to vote. In countries like Trinidad and Tobago, it's 8 to 9%. Barbados, 8 to 7%. Dominica, who just had an election, 96%. So 96%, if you're looking strictly at numbers, and you're saying, well, the country has 100 people. How could 96 be registered to vote? Because you have children, and you said you have children in school and all that. But you have people who come in and get registered per as the law allows, and they don't live here. But they're entitled to vote. They're entitled to pick a government in their country. And so when you have the continuous registration, that seems to be the trend. And so while it is something we're going to pay attention to and attempt to verify, which we've been doing, party has been doing an enormous amount of work on the ground, trying to make sure that no skullduggery happens, because we are coming out of a past where elections were rigged as a matter of course, and so we have to be careful with that. And some of the same old players are there. It's a lot harder to do now because of the changes that have been made in the way we count ballots, where we count the ballots, when we report those ballots, how we report them, the fact that we have polling agents in each polling station and things like that. And we have all these local observers, local and foreign observers. It's harder to rig now. So if the concern is that the percentage on the list, or the numbers on the list would mean that we're reflecting a large percentage of the population and they don't add up, that seems to be the trend. And some of these persons are not living here, but we cannot remove them. The court has said that. The Constitution is very clear as to what are the requirements for being on the list. You have to be Guyanese. Well, you have to be living in Guyana, and you have to be Guyanese. You can't take people off because they've gone on holiday. You can't take people off because they're living temporarily somewhere else. You can't do that.
2015 to now, what has changed with the PPP?
What has changed with the PPP? Well, I'm not sure.
Something went wrong up to 2015, or because the people would not have voted the way that they voted. Have we seen a change? What is the change?
Well, I don't know. Something went wrong. Could we be extremely idealistic and say that people voting for change is not necessarily something going wrong with the party? It's people exercising their democratic right to choose. I think several things happened. I think, one, the PPP was in office for a very long time, and so I saw that. I saw it happening. Somebody's yard flooded. It was the PPP's fault. If we had some local leaders on the ground who might not have been kind in explaining why something couldn't be given. So you might have had somebody say, you want lights. And you say, well, we done get y'all road. What more you want? That's local leadership, not necessarily central leadership. So you had some of that going on. You had the fact that we had been in office for so long, people had come to expect of us service and efficient service, and when it didn't come, that was something to be unhappy about, naturally, and perhaps correctly so. And you had agencies such as your newspaper, the Kaieteur News, pounding constantly on issues that were not necessarily always factual, but it left an impression, in my view, that contributed. But next to that, you also had this political, the APNU, the PNC had reformed themselves, the APNU and the AFC, who presented such a sexy picture. They had a solution for every problem. They had, they would not be corrupt. They would make sure there are no blackouts anymore. They would look after women. They would look after children. Young people would get jobs within a year of exiting UG. They knew how to solve crime. Look, we have a brigadier and all these soldiers and GDF people and police people and so on with us. They had a solution for everything. And so it wasn't only something going wrong with the PPP. And I don't believe it wasn't only something going wrong with the PPP. It was also this pull factor of this very sexy, new. People like, sometimes we can be attracted to change. You know, the grass is always greener kind of thing. And so I think both that played up, and I don't want to say we lost because we still have a petition in the court. Shame on the court system that it hasn't been heard as yet. But even if we lost, it was at 4,500 people, and I think in a sense it was good for the political party as a whole. I think for individuals, for sure, it was good for me. You get a chance to step back, to renew your commitment, to see things from a different perspective. When you're serving in government, sometimes you get busy, and you're busy serving. You have like a one-track kind of thing, and sometimes it's good as a refreshing.
I see.
It's good and refreshing and renewing to step back a little bit and renew your love for making sure people get the services that they're entitled to.
I do thank you for that. That's a different perspective. In closing, because I know that we're running out, but let me ask you, Human Services, you were very close to that ministry as a minister. Is there something that you believe that with our oil revenues and everything now that you would say, I would want my PPPC government to really look into this?
Well, like I said, Leonard, it would be extremely flattering if what Priya want is done. But the way we craft a manifesto, which we have done for every sector, is not only listen to me and to listen to the very experienced Bart Jagdeo or our presidential candidate Irfan Ali. It was to go to people. We had consultations. We had an email address. We had a phone line open where people could call and tell us what it is they wanted and how it is they wanted these services delivered. So for women want access to, because human services or what they call social what they call it now, social protection.
Ministers, yeah, social protection.
They have the mandate to look after women. Women want access to small grants. Women want access to business opportunities. And because, as you know, across the world, women own less property. They have very little collateral. So they're looking for low interest, collateral free types of loans that could get them off their feet. That is something we had started with the Women of Work. Do you remember the WOW program? That's all but collapsed under this government. It's not functioning anymore. So you'll see that. You'll see specific attention to vulnerable groups. You know, we had only about, in 2015, about 600 kids in orphanages. Mm-hmm. Those, we should be able to look after those children better, which we can do. That number has grown significantly from then to now, which is another telling thing if you're looking strictly at statistics. So to look after our orphans and vulnerable children, to better resource the Child Care and Protection Agency. I mean, that's something we started. Never existed in this country. That was established and commissioned in 2011 And it's been left how it was. I mean, very little has been done to it. Old age pensioners will get an increase, doubling of their old age pension within the first, immediately. I think the presidential candidate has committed to that, immediately upon entering office. The delivery of service is what people are very interested in too. So persons who live in far off villages will get their pensions delivered to them. They won't have to come out long distances, 6-hour drives and so on, to collect a pension. It's going to be delivered to them, and it's going to be double what it is now. We have to look specifically at domestic violence, domestic abuse, relations between persons, and how we regulate those in a manner that addresses the needs of everybody in the relationship. So addressing men specifically in those relationships through the Men's Affairs Bureau, not only women speaking to men, but men doing healthy things with men. So it's a wide I would invite you to read the manifesto, every single sector, for farmers, for hinterland development, for women, children, schools, oil and gas, any sector, forestry, mining, towns, rural areas, whatever you're thinking of, we've addressed there. Mostly it's not completed because this is what people said they wanted. So what you see reflected there is really what we were told were the needs of people.
So in closing, Ms. Manichan, what do you say to the Guyanese people come March 2nd?
I say you've had this incredible opportunity to see the PPP in office, to see the PPP make promises, to see the PPP deliver on those promises. You have seen what your pockets felt like when the PPP was in office, and you had the fantastic opportunity of also seeing the APNU AFC government function. They made you promises about everything under the sun, no blackouts, jobs for young people within a year of exiting the University of Guyana, free university education, increasing teachers' salary, doubling the public servant salary, increasing, looking after the discipline services, making sure women were on an equal footing with men, looking after our aged pop. You saw all those promises, and you saw that none were delivered. If you look at the 100-day plan for the Granger administration, it's 5 years on, and they haven't implemented their 100-day plan as yet. Mm-hmm. So what they're essentially coming to you and asking you to do is to give them 5 more years to implement the first 100-day plan. And I'm saying that you have seen, while we might want to be sympathetic to this aged group and giving them another chance, you see what that means for you. You see how quickly, I mean, I didn't think a country could turn around that quickly, where we could lose all these gains we'd made so quickly. And the most important thing that we've lost, I think, is our trust that our rights will be respected. Our right to speak freely, our rights under the Constitution, our rights to vote a government out through a no confidence motion, if that's what we want to do. We've seen how that has been trampled on, it has been disrespected, it has been disregarded completely. And people now have the fantastic opportunity of comparing the two political parties. I don't believe any of the small parties could offer anything. Frankly, the small parties are disappointing. They had opportunities. I know that they don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of people, and they're new, but nothing stopped any of them from standing up to this government, from holding a placard at GCOM, from writing letters, really condemning the wrongs that had been done by the Granger administration. Nothing stopped them from doing any of that. You didn't need money for it. You didn't need people for that. And so I don't believe a vote should be wasted on those parties. I think we should give them support to develop over the next 5 years, but to vote for them now would not get them in government. It's not going to happen. I believe the only party you can judge from its plan for you is the PPP, because we're the only party that has put out a plan. And I invite you, I don't ask you to vote for us because your mommy and your daddy voted for us. I'm asking you to vote for us. Look at our record. Look at the fact that we have moved from a hippie country, which is a heavily indebted, poor country, to a middle-income country. All the time that we were doing that, we were paying a heavy debt. And we were still giving benefits to people that had never gotten it before. Look at the fact that the World Bank said we cut poverty in half between 1991 and 2006. The World Bank said that. Look at the fact that our Caribbean neighbors have said that Guyana is the country that has been growing when we had the worldwide recession. Not only did we hold our own, we actually grew in that time. Look at our record, and then look at our plan for you. And understand that you are going to be included in decisions made for you, in benefiting from the goods and services of this country. Look at that and vote for us based on that. Because I guarantee you, if you look objectively, and that's what I want, not for people to vote on emotions, look objectively at what we're offering. And if you do, you will see that there's very little choice in this election on March 2nd. We have to, it's not only voting for yourself and your children and your wife, but it's voting to help that sugar worker in Region 6 who can't send his children to school. It's voting to look after the people in Region 9 who literally have no income because they have nowhere to sell their peanuts. It is voting to look after those Amrinian young people who got fired and nothing replaced their jobs. It's voting to look after the foresters and the lumberjacks in Ituni who have no ability to earn because the whole system has been changed and they have been victims of that change. So if there is something we have come on this earth to do, it is to look after our brothers and sisters. It's to be our brothers' keepers. And you can do that. You get that chance on March 2nd to look after the people around you, even people who will never know your name. Vote for them. And if you're doing that, the only party that we could possibly vote for would be the PPPC.
I thank you for that, Ms. Manager. And I want to ask you one last question before we close. Do you believe there should be a presidential candidate debate between our leaders? In keeping with what happens in the developed world?
I don't think it would hurt, but I don't know how beneficial that would be too. I don't know that Mr. Granger would subject himself to a debate, frankly. I think the population has seen what the parties offer, what they're capable of, what they can do. And I'm not sure that words are going to cut it anymore in the same way that they might have in 2015 and so on. I don't think it'll hurt, but I don't know that it's going to change significantly. But if the candidates agree, do we know who some candidates are? I mean, who's the candidate for the Liberty and Justice Party? Do we know that as yet?
No, we don't know that.
I don't think we know who all the candidates are. I think 3 of them were thrown out for being dual citizens or something, or will be thrown out. They were given a hearing as to why they should not be thrown out.
I think they're supposed to take a decision sometime this week. But
right,
that
so
is
I don't even know if that's settled as yet.
So that's it with you. It is Priya Manik Chan, former Minister of Education, former Minister of Human Services, and she's been outlining, making a pitch for you to vote her party, the PPPC, on March the 2nd. It's a mother of all elections. It's a very critical election, and we have to take into account what is good for Guyana, and she has attempted to make a case for that. And so as we head into the last couple of weeks, we are going to head down to some critical times of bringing some very important people, our representatives, who are going to tell you a little more about what is going to happen in these elections and probably make their pitch also. I'm your host, Leonard Gildharie of The Politically Show, and until next week, Wednesday, do have a pleasant rest of the week. Thank you.
Beaming across the counties of Essequibo, Demerara, and Berbice, This is Kaicho Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. Kaicho Radio, the radio with a difference.